The arrival in Bethlehem. The distance from the last public house to Bethlehem may have been 3 hours. Mary and Joseph went around by the north and approached the city on the west. A short distance outside the city, about a quarter of an hour's walk, led them to a large building surrounded by courtyards and smaller houses. There were trees in front of it, and all sorts of people encamped in tents around it. This house was once the paternal home of Joseph, and ages before it had been the family mansion of David. It was at this period used as the custom house of the Roman taxes. Joseph still had in the city a brother who was an innkeeper. He was not his own brother, but a stepbrother. Joseph did not go near him. Joseph had had 5 brothers, 3 own brothers, and 2 stepbrothers. Joseph was 5 and 40 years old. He was 30 years, and I think 3 months older than Mary. He was thin and had a fair complexion, prominent cheekbones, tinged with red, a high open forehead, and a brownish beard. Joseph went up to a large room in an upper story, where he was interrogated, who he was, etc., and his questioners examined long rolls of writing, numbers of which were hanging on the walls. They unrolled them and read to him his ancestry, also that of Mary. Joseph knew not before that through Joachim, Mary had descended in a straight line from David. The official asked him, "Where is thine wife?" For 7 years, the inhabitants of this part of the country were not regularly assessed, owing to various political troubles. I saw the numbers 5 and 2, and that certainly makes 7. The tax collecting had already been going on for many months, but 2 payments were still to be made. The people had to remain almost 3 months. They had indeed paid something here and there during those 7 years, but there had been no regular collection of taxes. Joseph did not pay anything on that first day, but his circumstances were inquired into. He told the official that he possessed no real estate, and that he lived by his trade, and the assistance of his wife's parents. Mary also was summoned to appear before the clerk, but not upstairs. She was interrogated in a passage on the first floor, and nothing was read to her. There were numbers of clerks and functionaries in the house, scattered throughout the different rooms, and a great many Romans and soldiers were to be met in the upper stories. There were also Pharisees and Sadducees, priests and elders, and all sorts of clerks and officials of both Jewish and Roman extraction. Joseph then went with Mary straight to Bethlehem, on whose outskirts the houses stood scattered, and into the heart of the city. At the different streets they met, he left Mary and the ass standing while he went up and down in search of an inn. Mary often had to wait long before Joseph, anxious and troubled, and when he returned. Nowhere did he find room. Everywhere he was sent away. And now it began to grow dark. Joseph at last proposed going to the other side of the city, where they would surely find lodgings. They proceeded down a street, which was more of a country road than a regular street, where the houses stood scattered along the hills, and at the end of it reached a low, level space or field. Here stood a very beautiful tree, with a smooth trunk, its branches spreading out like a roof. Joseph led Mary and the beast under it, and there left them to again go in quest of an inn. He went from house to house. His friends, of whom he had spoken to Mary, were unwilling to recognize him. Once, during his quest, he returned to Mary, he was waiting under the tree. He wept, and she consoled him. He started afresh on his search. But whenever he brought forward the approaching delivery of his wife as a pressing reason for receiving hospitality, he was dismissed still more quickly. Meanwhile, it had grown dark. Mary was standing under the tree, her ungirdled robe falling around her in full folds, her head covered with a white veil. The ass was nearby, its head turned toward the tree, at the foot of which Joseph made a seat for Mary with the baggage. Crowds were hurrying to and fro in Bethlehem, and many of the passerbys gazed curiously at Mary, as one naturally does on seeing a person standing a long time in the dark. I think also that some of them addressed her, and asked who she was. Ah, they little dreamed that the Savior was so near. Mary was so patient, so tranquil, so full of hope. She had indeed longed to wait. At last she sat down, her hands crossed on her breast, her head lowered. After a long time, Joseph returned in great dejection. I saw that he was shedding tears, and because he had failed again to find an inn, he hesitated to approach. But suddenly he bethought him of a cave outside Bethlehem, used as a storing place by the shepherds when they brought their cattle to the city. Joseph had often withdrawn thither to conceal himself from his brothers and to pray. It was likely to be deserted at that season, or if any shepherds did come, it would be easy to make friends with them. He and Mary might there find shelter for a while, and after a little rest, he would go out again on his search. And now they went around to the left, as if through the ruined walls, tombs, and ramparts of a country town. They mounted a rampart or hill, and then the road began again to descend. At last they reached a hill before which stood trees, firs, pines, or cedars, and trees with small leaves, like the box tree. In this hill was the cave, or vault, spoken of by Joseph. There were no houses around. One side of the cave was built up with rough masonry, through which the open entrance of the shepherds led down into the valley. Joseph opened the light wicker door, and as they entered, the she-ass ran to meet them. She had left them near Joseph's paternal house and had run around the city to this cave. She frolicked around and leapt gaily about them, so that Mary said, "Behold, it is surely God's will that we should be here." But Joseph was worried, and in secret a little ashamed, because he had so often alluded to the good reception they would meet in Bethlehem. There was a projection above the door, under which he stood the ass, and then proceeded to arrange a seat for Mary. It was quite dark, about 8 o'clock, when they reached this place. Joseph struck a light, and then went into the cave. The entrance was very narrow. The walls were stuffed with all kinds of coarse straw, like rushes, over which hung brown mats. Back on the vaulted part were some air holes in the roof, but here also everything was in disorder. Joseph cleared it out and prepared as much space in the back part as would afford room for a couch and seat for Mary, who had seated herself on a rug with her bundle for a support. The ass was then brought in, and Joseph fastened a lamp on the wall. While Mary was eating, he went out to the field in the direction of the milk cave and laid a leathern bottle on the rivulet that it might fill. He went also to the city, where he procured some little dishes a bundle of other little things, and I think some fruit. It was indeed the Sabbath, but on account of the numerous strangers in the city and their need of various necessities, provisions and utensils were exposed for sale on tables placed on the street corners. The price was paid down on the spot. I think servants or pagan slaves guarded the tables. When Joseph returned, he brought with him a small bundle of slender sticks, beautifully bound up with reeds, and a box with a handle in which were glowing coals. These he poured out at the entrance of the cave to make a fire. He next brought the bottle of water, which he had filled at the rivulet, and prepared some food. It consisted of a stew made of yellow corn, some kind of large plant that contained many seeds, and a little bread. After they had eaten, and Mary had lain down to rest upon her rush couch, over which was spread a cover, Joseph began to prepare his own resting place at the entrance of the cave. When this was done, he went again into the city. Previously to setting out, he had stopped up all the openings of the cave in order to keep the air out. Then, for the first time, I saw the Blessed Virgin on her knees in prayer, after which she laid down upon the carpet, her head resting on her arm, her bundle serving for a pillow. At one of the broad parts of the cave, the ass took its stand. It had no trough, but a large leathern bag was placed before it, or hung in the corner. Behind was a small side cave, just large enough to allow the animal to stand upright. There the fodder was stored. A gutter ran along this corner, and I saw Joseph cleaning the cave out every day. Where Mary reposed before the birth of the child, and where I beheld her elevated above the ground at the moment of her delivery, there was a similar seat of stone. The spot in which the crib stood was a deep recess, or side vault. Near it was a second entrance into the cave, which was in the ridge of a hill that ran toward the city. In the rear, the hill sank into a very charming valley planted with rows of trees. This valley led to the suckling cave of Abraham, situated in a projection of the opposite hill. The valley may have been 1/8 of an hour in width, and through it flowed that little rivulet from which Joseph had procured the water. Besides the real crib cave, there were in the same hill, but lying somewhat deeper, 2 other caves, and one in which the Blessed Virgin often remained hidden, as from soldiers.